The best seat in the movies used to be the back seat of your father's car. You came in your pajamas, you brought your pillow. The light went purple over the parking field, and a screen the size of a barn stood up against the sky, and your whole family watched a movie together without ever leaving the car. A speaker hung on the window glass, crackling. Somewhere down front, near the foot of the screen, there was a playground, and you ran on it in the dark until the show started. When you finally fell asleep across the seat, nobody minded. That was half the point. This is the story of the American drive-in theater, where it came from, why it once stood in nearly every town in the country, and why the field where yours used to be is probably a parking lot now. And it begins, of all places, with a man trying to make his mother comfortable. In the early 1930s in Camden, New Jersey, there was a fellow named Richard Hollingshead. He worked at his father's auto parts company, and he loved the movies, and he had a problem he could not stop thinking about. His mother, the story goes, did not fit well in ordinary theater seats. The hard, narrow chairs were a misery for her. And Hollingshead thought, why should anyone have to leave the comfort of their own car to see a picture? So he started experimenting in his own driveway. He set a movie projector on the hood of his car. He hung a sheet between two trees. He put a radio behind the sheet for sound, and he backed cars up at different angles to figure out how you could park a whole field of them and still let everyone see. He worked out the spacing, the ramps, the rows tilted just enough so the car behind could see over the car in front. He patented the whole idea in 1933, and then, with about $30,000, he opened the first one. It opened in June of 1933, just outside Camden. He called it Park-In Theaters. The price was 25 cents for the car and 25 cents per person, and no family ever paid more than $1 to get in. $1 for the whole carload. That number is the key to this entire story, so hold on to it, because that was the genius of the drive-in. It was not really competing with the fancy movie palace downtown. It was competing with staying home. And it won because it solved every single thing that made a family say, oh, let's just stay in tonight. The baby could come and cry and bother nobody because you were in your own car. The kids could wear their pajamas. You did not need a babysitter, which alone could cost more than the tickets. You could bring your own food. You could talk. You could stretch out. A young couple could have an evening of privacy that was hard to come by in 1955. A tired mother and father could bring 4 restless children and not have to shush a single one. The drive-in welcomed exactly the people the indoor theater quietly did not want. So it spread, and it spread fast, especially after the war. America came home from the 1940s with money and cars and a baby boom and a powerful desire for cheap family fun. The drive-in was built for that family precisely. By 1958, there were more than 4,000 drive-in theaters across the United States. Some counts put it closer to 5,000. They stood at the edge of nearly every town of any size, great white screens facing away from the road, waiting for dark. If you are enjoying this trip back, do an old man a favor and tap subscribe. I spend my days out looking for the places that used to be on every corner and now take some hunting. A drive-in is one of the hardest to find and one of the best when you do. Come along with me. Now let me take you inside the gates, because the movie was honestly the least of it. You would line up at dusk and pay at a little booth. You would roll slowly over the gravel, looking for the right spot, and ease the front wheels up onto a little earthen ramp so the car nosed upward toward the screen. Then you would reach out the window and lift the speaker off its pole and hook it onto your glass. It was a tinny, crackling little thing, and half the time one channel was blown, but it was magic to a kid. Later on, the better theaters let you tune the sound in on your car radio, in real stereo, which felt like the future. Down at the base of that giant screen, there was almost always a playground. Swings, a slide, a merry-go-round, right there in the open field. Before the picture started, the whole place filled, with children running wild in the last of the daylight while the parents set up the back seat with blankets and pillows. And then there was the snack bar. The drive-in did not really make its money on tickets, remember? $1 a carload does not pay for much. It made its money on the walk to the concession stand at intermission. Between the two features, a little cartoon would come on the screen, dancing hot dogs and singing soda cups, counting down the minutes until the next movie. And the whole field would get out and walk through the dark to the snack bar for popcorn and burgers and ice cream and cold drinks. That was the real business. The movie was the bait. The popcorn was the catch. And it was almost always a double feature. 2 movies for your dollar, with a cartoon and the intermission countdown in between. The first picture was usually the better one, shown while the little kids were still awake. The second was the cheaper thrill, the monster movie or the western running toward midnight after the small ones had finally conked out. That late slot built the drive-in its other reputation, the one the parents pretended not to know about. For a teenager with a borrowed car and a date, the back row of the drive-in was the most private public place in town. Plenty of marriages in this country started in a steamed-up car with a second feature flickering, unwatched, against the night. In the colder months, the better theaters even handed out little in-car heaters you could hook on the window next to the speaker. So the season ran long. People went to the drive-in in October with the windows fogging and a blanket over their knees, and thought nothing of it. And that speaker deserves a word of its own. It was a heavy gray box that hung on a post by every parking spot, and you lifted it off and hooked it over your half-open window. The sound was tinny and a little muffled, and on a cold night you cracked the glass just enough to fit it and let in the chill to hear the picture. Every drive-in lost a few of those speakers every night to people who drove off forgetting to hang them back up and tore them clean off the post. Half the country has a grandfather with a story about that. For a family on a summer night, it was close to perfect. Cheap, easy, warm, and yours. You drove in as the sun went down, and you drove out near midnight with the kids asleep in a pile and a good night behind you. If your own childhood just flickered up on that screen for a second, do me a kindness and subscribe. These are the places I spend my days trying to keep lit, and it helps to know somebody out there remembers them too. And then, over about 20 years, almost all of them died. Let me walk you through how, because no single thing killed the drive-in. It was a slow squeeze from several directions at once. The first pressure was the land itself. A drive-in needs a big, flat, open field, and in the 1930s and 40s, that kind of land sat cheap on the edge of town. But towns grow, the cities crept outward, and suddenly that big empty field at the edge of town was not at the edge anymore. It was prime ground, worth a fortune to a developer who wanted to put up a shopping center or a subdivision or a supermarket. For a lot of drive-in owners, the math became impossible to ignore. The theater made a modest living on summer nights. The dirt under it was worth more than the theater would earn in 20 years. One by one, owners sold the land, and the screens came down, and the houses and stores went up. And a drive-in only worked half the year in most of the country. A hard winter shut it down for months. Compare that to the indoor theater that ran every single night, rain or snow, and you start to see how thin the margins really were. The drive-in lived on warm evenings and popcorn, and warm evenings do not come with a lease. There was the weather inside the gates too. A sudden summer storm could wash out a whole night's take. A plague of mosquitoes could empty the field. The owner, who fell in love with the romance of the place, still had to answer to the sky every single evening, and the sky does not care about anybody's mortgage. The second pressure came right into the living room. Television. First just television, then color television, then cable, with more channels than anyone knew what to do with. Why load the whole family into the car when there was a screen glowing for free in your own den? Then, in the early 1980s came the home video machine and the video rental store on the corner. Now you could watch nearly any movie you wanted, any night, in your own house, for $1 or $2. The drive-in's great advantage, a cheap night of family entertainment, suddenly had a rival sitting right on top of the television. And there were smaller cuts, too, that added up. The energy crisis of the 1970s made gasoline expensive, and a drive-in is useless to a family that cannot afford to drive to it. Around the same time, the clocks changed. Wider use of daylight saving time meant the sun stayed up later in the summer, and a drive-in cannot start the show until it is dark. An 8 o'clock movie became a 9 o'clock movie, which is rather late for a family with small children and a long week. There was one more thing, quieter than the rest. The movie business itself stopped helping. The big studios wanted their new pictures in the fancy indoor multiplexes that were going up at the malls, the ones with a dozen screens and a popcorn machine the size of a car. The drive-in often got stuck with the older films or the cheaper ones weeks after everybody had already seen them. It is hard to sell a night out when you are showing last month's picture on a screen that needs a new coat of paint. Put it all together. The land got too valuable. The home got too entertaining. The gas got too dear. The dark came too late. The studios looked the other way. None of it was a death blow on its own. All of it together was more than the drive-in could carry. So the screens came down, field by field, through the 1970s and 80s and 90s. The speakers went silent on their poles. The snack bars closed. The playgrounds rusted. And the great white screens, the ones that had stood against 1,000 summer skies, were knocked flat and hauled away. From more than 4,000 at the peak, the country today has fewer than 300 drive-ins still running. That is not nothing, and I want to be clear about that. But it is a small remnant of what once stood at the edge of nearly every American town. And here is the part that should give you a little hope, because I do not like to leave you in an empty field. Those few hundred survivors are still out there, still running, still putting a picture up against the night sky every summer weekend. They held on through television and video, and the developers kept alive by stubborn families who refused to let the last screen in the county come down. And here is a funny thing. A few years back, when the whole country suddenly could not sit shoulder to shoulder in a closed room, people remembered the drive-in. For one strange season, those old screens lit up again for crowds who had never been to one. Some towns held graduations there. Some held concerts. The drive-in, of all things, turned out to be exactly the place a nervous country needed, because it had always let you be together and apart at the same time. The old idea was waiting, right where it had always been, for anyone who finally thought to look. You can still go. That is what I want you to hear. This is not entirely a story about a thing you missed. For most of you watching, there is a real drive-in within a few hours' drive, and on a warm Friday night, it is doing the exact same thing it did in 1958. Charging you by the carload, selling you popcorn at intermission, letting your kids run wild under the screen in the last of the light. So here is what I would ask. If you grew up at the drive-in, tell me about it below. The town, the screen, the movie you fell asleep during, whether your father snuck you all in for free in the trunk, which I have heard about more times than I can count and will not be reporting to anyone. I read every comment, and the places you name are the places I go looking next. And if you have a drive-in still running near you, leave that too, so somebody else reading this can go find it. Subscribe while you are here so the next of these reaches you. Some of these stories end in a parking lot. This one does not have to, as long as a few hundred screens keep going up at dusk. Richard Hollingshead just wanted his mother to be comfortable at the movies. He could not have known that the simple idea, watch the picture from your own car, would become a summer ritual for generations, and then nearly vanish, and then just barely survive. But it did survive. Somewhere tonight, the light is going purple over a gravel field, and a yee-yaw screen the size of a barn is standing up against the dark, and a kid in pajamas is climbing into the back seat with a pillow, the same as it ever was. You just have to know where to look.